Tonight, we journey past the gleaming armor of knights and the high walls of castles to the very heart of the medieval world, the forge. Forget the romanticized epics for a moment. We're stepping into the sweltering, soot-choked reality of the man who literally hammered that age into existence. This is the story of the blacksmith, a life defined not by glory, but by the searing heat, the deafening clang of steel, and the relentless labor that underpinned an entire civilization. Prepare yourself for a tale of fire, iron, and grit. You've seen the cinematic portrayal, haven't you? A brawny artisan, bathed in a warm, dramatic glow, swinging his hammer in a graceful arc. Incandescent embers drift through the air like fireflies in a majestic, slow-motion bullet. But let's shatter that myth right now. A real medieval forge was an assault on the senses, a chaotic, dangerous place of blinding light, oppressive heat, and a constant, roaring noise that vibrated in your bones. The only thing majestic about it was the sheer endurance required to survive the day. Let's be perfectly clear, the authentic life of a medieval smith was defined by its misery. It was a profession of profound physical hardship, an ordeal of filth and exhaustion, where every muscle screamed in protest and hands were a permanent landscape of weeping blisters. This was not a trade for the faint of heart. It was a grueling, thankless existence that, for the vast majority of those who toiled within it, was simply a raw, unpleasant reality they were forced to endure from birth until an early grave. Imagine being born not into a soft cradle, but into a searing crucible. Your family bestows no titles or lands, only a legacy of soot-stained hands and calloused resolve. Your first lullabies are the rhythmic pounding of the hammer on the anvil, and your first scent is the acrid aroma of coal smoke and hot iron. Your destiny was forged long before you were conceived. You are simply the next link in a chain of hardship, born to sweat and bleed in the shadow of the great anvil that will one day claim your life as it did your father's. From the moment you can walk without stumbling into the fire pit, your apprenticeship begins. By the tender age of 6, you are your father's assistant, a quaint medieval term for an unpaid, overworked child with no rights. Your education comes not from patient lessons, but from grueling, repetitive labor. You are expected to learn through observation and instinct, absorbing the dangerous craft by hauling, pumping, and holding tools your small hands can barely manage. Childhood is a privilege this life simply cannot afford. While other village children chase chickens or skip stones, your world is a dirt-floored shed filled with open flames and 1,000 opportunities for injury. Your toys are the heavy iron tongs, your playground the treacherous space beside a furnace burning at over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The only games you learn are grim ones like, "What's how hot this is?" a lesson you only lose once, and "hold the hammer until your arms go numb." It is a childhood spent mastering the art of not dying in a workshop of molten metal. Your father, the master of this fiery domain, is a formidable figure carved from muscle and silent resentment. His vocabulary has been scorched away by the forge's heat, reduced to monosyllabic commands, guttural grunts, and the eternal phrase, "hit it harder." His hands are like gnarled oak, his face a permanent scowl etched by decades of smoke and stress. He teaches you everything through intimidating silence and the expectation that you absorb the craft by sight alone. Questions are not welcome here. They are an invitation to feel the sting of a flung tool. Did someone mention holidays? That is a lovely and completely alien concept. The forge is an insatiable beast that never rests, and therefore, neither do you. The needs of the village are constant and unending. A broken plough or a cracked church bell does not wait for a festival. You learn a fundamental truth with bitter speed. Free time is merely the fleeting, anxious pause between one grueling job and the next. There is no respite, only a change in the piece of hot metal demanding your attention and sweat. Though you are officially learning a trade, your real education is in the art of suffering. Your curriculum is centered on pain tolerance, a superhuman resistance to blistering heat, and the peculiar ability to fall asleep on your feet for a few precious seconds at a time. By the age of 10, You already have the stooped posture of an old man and the calloused hands of a lifelong labourer. Your arms are strong enough to haul buckets that weigh more than the family dog, assuming it didn't flee the deafening noise years ago. This is your life now: sweat, smoke, and unending toil. If you held any naive hope for a few carefree years of play before the weight of the hammer descended upon your young shoulders, you were sorely mistaken. In the soot-stained world of a blacksmith's child, the concept of childhood is a vague suggestion, not a recognized phase of life. It's a fleeting dream that evaporates in the forge's heat. Your milestones are not measured by age or games, but by your capacity for labor. The moment you can lift a bucket of coal without toppling over, you are drafted into service. Your playroom is a smoke-blackened shed, a hazardous chamber where your jungle gym is a rack of iron tongs hanging next to a pit of glowing coals. One wrong step, one moment of boyish distraction, and you receive an unscheduled, agonizing lesson in how long skin can sizzle before your father notices the smell. Your days are a tightrope walk over a pit of fire, and the only prize for not falling is the dubious honor of getting to do it all again tomorrow. Your survival depends on a level of vigilance no child should have to possess. While your official title is apprentice, your true job is to perform every miserable, thankless task no one else desires, and to expect a scolding regardless of your effort. You stoke the fire until your face is scorched, pump the heavy bellows until your shoulders burn, and learn to develop a sixth sense for falling horseshoes. Your only payment is a portion of the family meal, and on a truly exceptional day, a grunt of mild approval which, in the sparse language of the forge, means you didn't completely ruin that today. Occasionally, you catch a fleeting glimpse of the village kids you once knew, now out in the sunlit fields, learning the far gentler craft of milking goats. A sharp pang of envy hits you. You find yourself jealous of their simpler lives, even if they do smell of cheese and manure. They might grow up to be humble farmers or shepherds, but their professions involve fewer encounters with glowing weaponry and a significantly lower risk of surprise third-degree burns. Their futures are tied to the earth, while yours is chained to the anvil. You, on the other hand, are condemned to a far more tedious fate learning to manufacture nails by hand. Not a few, but thousands of them. It is a mind-numbing task of heating, hammering, and reheating identical pieces of iron until each one is deemed straight enough to hold together some lord's new chicken coop. While a master smith might expertly churn out over 100 nails in an hour, your clumsy efforts are slow and laborious. And if you are lucky enough to be allowed to swing a hammer yourself, your father is always there to point out every single thing you are doing wrong. Do not even let the thought, "I'm tired," form in your mind. That phrase is forbidden in the forge, a concept from a softer world. Here, fatigue is dismissed as a weakness, a moral failing. Burnout is for candles, not for blacksmiths. And so you keep swinging, you keep sweating, and you learn to keep from crying where anyone can see. In the hardened eyes of your master, who is also your father, you are not a child anymore. You are a blacksmith in training, and the training is a crucible with no foreseeable end. The forge is not merely where you work, it becomes your entire existence. It is a living, breathing creature that dominates your senses and reshapes your very being. By your teens, it no longer feels like a place but a temperamental beast you must feed, control, and fear. You know its sounds by heart, the bellows wheezing, the iron hissing in the quenching tub, the sharp clang of hammer on metal echoing like a war drum. It is a brutal medieval symphony, and your body learns to move in time with it, a dance you perform whether awake or half asleep. After a time, you cease to notice the oppressive heat, not because it gets easier, but because you have simply surrendered to it as a law of your world, like gravity or taxes. Your skin darkens from the smoke, not the sun, and your clothes, the same soot-stained tunic and leather apron day after day, smell of scorched wool, grease, and desperation. You develop an instinctual map of the forge, knowing which stones get too hot to stand on and which shadows hide a treacherous piece of scrap metal waiting to trip you. You start to forget what silence sounds like. The hiss, the clang, and the crackle are so constant that when the forge does go quiet, the void is unsettling. You find yourself twitching, your muscles anticipating a beat in the song you've been forced to memorize since childhood. Your friends, if you have any left, rarely see you. "He's probably at the forge," becomes their default explanation for your absence. You are no longer just a boy. You are becoming an extension of the forge itself, a two-legged instrument of fire and steel. And then a strange and contradictory feeling begins to take root in your heart. You start to love it. Not the burns or the blisters, but the profound, almost magical satisfaction that comes when a piece of inert metal finally bends to your will. It's the moment the blade you've hammered gleams perfectly, or the horseshoe you've labored over fits the hoof just right. For a brief, glorious instant, you are not just a soot-covered boy, you are a creator. Then, the moment passes, the next order arrives, and the fire roars again. By the time your friends are just starting to grow into their lanky teenage limbs, yours already feel like they've been through a siege. While they are getting taller, you are getting stooped and scarred. Your arms are thick, but not in a heroic, knightly way. It's the physique of someone repeatedly attacked by anvils. Your back is a tragedy in the making, hunched from hauling metal. Your knees creak, and your shoulders pop with every swing of the hammer, sound that has become part of your personal soundtrack. In the unforgiving world of the forge, the concept of recovery is a dangerous myth. Iron doesn't wait while you mend, and fire offers no sympathy. If you pull a muscle, you learn to work in a new, agonizing posture. If your wrist screams in protest, you switch hands, your movements clumsy but unbroken. The forge is a relentless, uncaring master that demands constant labor. Your only option is to work through the injury, swallowing the pain and praying that the damage you're doing today doesn't render you useless for the work that you must complete tomorrow. You might imagine that a day of such Herculean labor would grant you the mercy of deep, dreamless sleep. But rest is a cruel parody. As you collapse onto your straw-stuffed sack, your body refuses to be still. Your muscles ache with a throbbing intensity that makes comfort impossible, and your ears are filled with the phantom ringing of the day's iron symphony. Worst of all, your arms twitch with phantom swings, your hands clenching as if you are sparring with ghosts in your dreams, endlessly repeating the motions of your waking nightmare. When you speak of this endless agony, your father offers no comfort, only a grim grunt of approval. "Good," he'll rasp, his eyes reflecting the fire's glow. "You're learning." And in a strange, twisted way, you understand that you are. You are not growing in spite of the pain. You are growing because of it. Like the very metal you hammer, your body is being hardened through heat and pressure. But make no mistake, this is a destructive creation. By the time you reach adulthood, your body feels as though it has already lived 2 full lives. In most professions, smoke is a problem to be avoided. In your job, it is a constant, rude coworker. The forge is a choking chamber where every breath is seasoned with the fine aroma of coal dust, scorched metal, and ash. If you can see clearly more than 6 feet ahead, it's not a blessing but a mistake. Someone has forgotten to light the fire. There is no chimney, just a hole in the roof that traps more smoke than it lets out. Your world is soot-black walls, your father's hacking cough, and the wind that blows everything into your eyes. Your lungs, you suspect, have entered a long-term toxic relationship with the air you breathe. At first, the smoke burns. Then it becomes a constant irritation. Finally, one day, it's simply normal. Racking coughing fits are no longer an interruption, but part of the forge's rhythm. The black mucus you expel is not ideal, but it's consistent. You've reached a point where clean air feels suspicious. Even your voice has changed, worn down to the gravelly rasp of an old man who gargles with boiling tar. It isn't just the smoke from the fire you contend with. The air is a thick, poisonous soup. There's fine metal dust from grinding that lodges deep in your lungs and oily fumes that billow up from quenching hot iron. Sometimes there are fumes from whatever unfortunate material has fallen into the coals, be it leather, wood, or worse. You've likely inhaled 3 different kinds of poison by noon. As for protective gear, a damp rag tied around your face is the best you can do, and it quickly becomes sweaty, gross, and somehow smells worse than the smoke. The long-term damage of this life is not a question of if, but when. Asthma, black lung, and an early death are all unspoken parts of the career package. But you aren't thinking long-term, you can't afford to. Your focus is narrowed to the immediate, tangible present, finishing that gate hinge before your father notices how crooked it is. In the suffocating world of a medieval blacksmith, you don't breathe to survive. You breathe just enough to keep hammering until the day is finally done. By now, you've developed a deeply intimate yet dysfunctional relationship with your tools, based on pain and grim necessity. Your hammer is the most personal. It is less a tool and more a crude extension of your arm. You've cursed it 1,000 times. You have swung it with such repetitive violence that your shoulder now clicks like a haunted maraca. But you know that without it, you are just a sweaty boy in a smoke-filled hut. The hammer is what makes you a blacksmith, and it is also what makes you bleed on a regular basis. Then there are your tongs, clumsy and perpetually uncooperative, designed to pinch you at the exact wrong moment. You've burned your fingertips more times than you can count trying to get a secure grip on a piece of glowing iron. The metal slips, the grip fails, and you start again. You yell, and your father's only advice is to grip it like you mean it. You often consider throwing the cursed things into the fire just to teach them a lesson. Your chisel, meanwhile, used to be sharp but is now mostly a suggestion of a blade. Your tool bench looks less like a craftsman's station and more like a medieval torture rack, and in many ways it is. Every single item you own, files, awls, punch tools, rivet sets, has conspired to injure you at some point. You've been jabbed, crushed, pinched, and sliced by the very instruments of your trade. Your fingers have developed a painful memory. They instinctively flinch at the sight of a new tool, anticipating the inevitable pain it will bring. You have learned that in the forge, everything that helps you can also hurt you. Your apron, a thick slab of hardened leather, is meant to protect you, and it does, if by protect you mean it's excellent at catching flying shards of hot metal and holding them against your body in a smouldering hug. It is a garment that is more scorched than stitched, and in the cold of winter, it stiffens to the consistency of a corpse, making movement a stiff and awkward struggle. It is less a piece of safety equipment and more a canvas for the burns and scorch marks that tell the story of your daily battle with fire. And yet, despite this constant betrayal from your tools, you care for them as if they were fragile family members. You meticulously sharpen them, oil them to ward off rust, and line them up in their proper place each night. You do this not out of love, but out of desperate, pragmatic necessity. If one of your essential tools breaks, you cannot work, you cannot earn, you cannot eat. No tool means no income, so yes, your tools are your life. But they have also declared a slow, grinding war on your body and your sanity. You do not wear a crown or lead armies, but without you, the village would grind to a halt by Tuesday. As the blacksmith, you are the indispensable heart of the community, needed by everyone for everything. You are the medieval equivalent of customer service, tech support, and roadside assistance, all rolled into one soot-covered figure. The knight needs a new sword, you make it. The farmer breaks his plough, you fix it. A monk's bell cracks, a baker's oven door jams. Guess who gets the call? You, every single time. They all arrive acting as if you've just been sitting idly by the fire, patiently waiting for their problem to manifest. They show up unannounced, tracking mud across your floor and radiating an aura of cheerful entitlement. I know you're busy. They always begin before delivering the 5 words that haunt your existence. But could you just? That phrase is the bane of your life. The most infuriating part is that you almost never receive a proper thank you. They assume your labor is their right, that you were born to serve their needs. As if you should feel honored to repair their rusty bucket at sunset. Payment is often inconsistent at best and insulting at worst. If you're lucky, you receive a few coins. More often, payment comes as goods, a portion of grain, a lump of cheese, or, most frustratingly, as hollow promises forgotten by the next market day. One man, after you spent hours repairing his cart axle, paid you with a dead chicken he claimed was good for soup. You discovered later, as the foul smell filled your home, that it most certainly was not. You are also the designated fixer for problems entirely self-inflicted by others. A gate hinge is bent because a lout decided to sit on it. You fix it. A dagger is broken in a tavern brawl. You fix it. Yet when praise is given, it is always for the knight, the priest, or the miller. You are merely background noise, a dependable utility, a tool to be used, not a person to be acknowledged. But here is your secret, bitter satisfaction, with absolute certainty that they couldn't last a week without you. You would think that peace would be good news. No raiders, no screaming noblemen demanding a new sword by sundown. But for you, peace is a quiet disaster. It's terrible for business. While you mend ploughs and hinges in peacetime, what truly pays the bills is the brutal, profitable industry of war. When there is fighting, everyone needs you. Weapons, armor, and arrowheads by the hundreds are in constant demand. During wartime, you are flooded with work, and for once, the coins roll in. You may be exhausted, but your belly is full. But then, inevitably, the war ends. The local lord declares a truce, the knights stop marching, and your flow of lucrative orders vanishes overnight. No more swords. No more helmets. Your business is reduced to a farmer asking if you can sharpen a sickle for 3 onions as payment. And sure, you can make household goods, cauldrons, door handles, cooking spits, but there's very little profit in it. Everyone wants you to work like a wizard, but pay you like a stable boy. Every transaction becomes a negotiation. In these lean times, you start to miss the structured chaos of conflict. Not the bloodshed, of course, but the steady flow of orders and the sense of purpose it brought. When knights lined up outside your forge with dented shields and coin purses, you mattered. Now, you're making keys for doors no one locks and patching pots and should have been thrown out weeks ago. Peace, for everyone else, means safety and rest. For you, it means ignoring economic anxiety, and deep down, a treacherous part of you whispers for just a small skirmish. Some jobs in this world have a clear finish line, a task completed followed by rest or reward. Blacksmithing is not one of those jobs. Your work is a circle, it is never done. The moment you fix one thing, 3 more break. You repair a gate hinge, and the wheel falls off a cart. You finish a batch of nails, and a customer demands 10 more, but longer this time, and informs you they can't pay until the harvest. Your work follows you into your dreams, a constant, hammering presence that grants no peace. Even the jobs that appear simple are traps, designed to consume what little time and patience you have left. A villager will wander in, holding a rake so mangled it looks like it lost a fight with a wild boar, and say with baffling optimism, "It just needs a little fixing." However, that this little fixing is a 2-hour ordeal of carefully heating, reshaping, and hammering, all while the owner hovers nearby, asking with infuriating frequency, "Is it ready yet?" And just when you think you can finally sit down, your apprentice comes running with fresh news of another's misfortune. Because you are the blacksmith, you are everyone else's last resort. Your work is not confined to the tasks brought by others. The forge itself is a needy and temperamental master that demands constant attention. The fire will not stoke itself, and your precious tools, if ignored for even a day, will begin to succumb to rust. The massive anvil shifts in the summer heat, and the leather of your bellows cracks in the winter cold. Even the holiest of days offers no true reprieve. Sunday is technically a day of rest, unless, of course, someone's ox cart breaks. Then, suddenly, you find yourself back in your scorched apron, hammering on the Lord's day and praying the priest doesn't walk by. You do not keep a to-do list, because such a thing implies a point when all tasks will be crossed off and you can finally rest. There is no such point. Blacksmithing is not a job with a beginning and an end. It is a relentless, punishing cycle of work, fix, and repeat until your body or your hammer finally gives out. The worst part, the secret you would never confess, is that on some deep, masochistic level, you have come to love it. The endless demand gives you a grim purpose, and the heat of the fire is a familiar, if painful, embrace. You would think a man who spends his day swinging a heavy hammer, burning calories like a runaway horse, would earn at least a hearty meal. You would be wrong. Your diet is a cruel joke consisting of coarse bread and a bowl of cold pottage that might contain yesterday's turnip. A bit of salted pork is a luxury reserved for a special day, which today is not. You eat standing up, one hand still clutching your tongs, the other shielding your food from the forge's raining ash. Meals are rushed, conversations are grunts, and you eat not to enjoy, but simply to survive. Now, let us speak of sleep, or rather, the cruel parody of it you are granted each night. When you finally crawl onto your bed, a straw-stuffed sack that is lumpy, flat, and full of mysterious crawling things, your body rebels. Your hands throb, your back feels like it lost a bar fight, and your ears are still ringing from a full day of iron symphonies. Your only blanket is a scorched wool sheet that smells of forged smoke, old oil, and regret. Just as you close your eyes, your brain remembers an unfinished order or an unpaid debt. Your life becomes a desperate negotiation with exhaustion and obligation, a survival fueled by sheer stubbornness. You learn to get by on scraps and snatches of rest, stolen bites of food and half naps taken while leaning against a wall. In your world, the hierarchy of needs is brutally simple. Productivity comes before nourishment, and deadlines come before dozing. Food and sleep are not breaks from the job. They are merely brief intermissions between hammer swings, momentary pauses in the endless performance of your labor. There was a time, perhaps in the distant memories of early childhood, when your hands were soft. Now, they are ruined artifacts of your trade, stiff, swollen, and so callous they barely feel anything except a deep, constant ache. You can no longer hold a quill or even lace your own boots with ease. But you can confidently grab red-hot tongs with the casual assurance of someone who's been burned so often that pain itself has lost its meaning. Your hands have become tools, but at the cost of your human touch. Every single joint in your hands pops and clicks when you move, a grim percussion to your day. Your knuckles look as though they have been mugged by a hammer. Your palms are a map of blisters, layered like tree rings that mark the seasons of your toil. You've lost fingernails more than once. You once crushed your thumb so badly it turned black for 2 weeks. But you didn't stop working, you just switched hands and grunted more than usual. The pain is constant, but the work is more so. Cuts are a daily, unremarkable feature of your life. Sometimes it's a chipped edge on a piece of iron. Other times a file bites back. Every week, something leaks blood. You simply wrap the wound in a dirty scrap of cloth, curse under your breath, and keep working. Worse still are the burns. Some are mild reminders that iron is unforgiving. Others are the kind that sizzle, bubble, and leave scars that tell their own horrifying stories. You've branded yourself more times than a cattle farmer, and you're no longer mad about it. You're just used to it. The one thing that has improved is your grip strength. You can crush walnuts in your fist as if they owe you money. But this raw power has come at the cost of all dexterity. That's gone forever. You drop small things constantly, and your fingers shake when they get cold. At 30, you have the hands of a 70-year-old knight who lost 3 wars. But despite it all, these mangled hands are what keep you alive. They hurt constantly, but they work, because in this life, it doesn't matter how broken your body is as long as you can still swing. Let's be brutally honest, you don't smell great. In fact, you haven't smelled clean since you were 5. The moment you became your father's apprentice, Your personal fragrance took a permanent turn toward unwashed ashtray mixed with burnt bacon and desperation. This is the olfactory reality of a blacksmith's life, where no matter how hard you scrub, you smell like fire forever. The smoke seeps into your clothes, your hair, and your very skin, becoming an inseparable part of you. The forge burns all day, and in a way, so do you. Your sweat doesn't even smell like regular sweat anymore. It's more like smoked meat left out in the sun. You could bathe in theory, but baths are rare and water is cold. Besides, what's the point? You're working 6 days a week, covered again in soot, grease, and coal dust before the sun is even fully up. You'd be filthy again by breakfast, making any attempt at cleanliness a fleeting and futile exercise. Your clothes offer no help in this aromatic battle. You wear the same seamed tunic and scorched leather apron every single day. They haven't been truly clean since the last festival, and even then, someone spilled oil on them before noon. Now they just hang on your body like a protective layer of hardened funk. Flowers wilt near you, bread goes stale faster, and cats hiss when you pass. The worst part is that people notice, parting like the Red Sea when you enter the tavern. The innkeeper knows to seat you in the corner near a window, not out of courtesy, but for the survival of his other patrons. No one wants to share a bench with the human embodiment of a burnt fence post. Still, you take it in stride. A little shame is better than going unnoticed. You are known. People say, "That's the blacksmith," with a mixture of respect for your vital craft and an undeniable wrinkling of their noses. You are not charming, but you are definitely aromatic. You come to accept your unique and overpowering aroma as a mark of your profession. Besides, smelling like fire means you've been working. Smelling like iron means you've been crafting. And smelling like sweat-soaked leather dipped in soot and regret. Well, that just means you're a professional. It is the scent of your survival, the undeniable flag of your trade, and no one can ever accuse you of not earning it through relentless, back-breaking labor. You did not choose this life of fire and iron. The forge chose you, its claim laid upon you through your father's calloused hands, and the heavy expectations passed down like a rusty, burdensome heirloom. And now, with a sense of grim inevitability, you find yourself doing the very same thing to your own son. He doesn't play with wooden swords, he fetches coal, pumps the bellows, and holds the tongs steady while sparks rain down around him as you mutter the familiar command, "Don't flinch." He is perhaps 7, but he already smells like burnt metal and wet burlap. You feel a pang of guilt, but only a bit, because you are not being cruel, you are preparing him. This is the trade, and this is survival. You watch him stare, wide-eyed in a mixture of awe and fear, and you remember that look. It's the same one you used to give your father, back when he seemed like a mountain made of stone. Now you understand. He wasn't made of stone, just exhaustion and responsibility. You teach the boy everything, how to gauge heat by color, and how to listen to the metal sing. You shout sometimes more out of habit than anger. "Hold it right! That's too cold!" Don't cry, it's only a burn. You try to soften things when you can, with a story by the fire or a piece of dried fruit, but tenderness doesn't last long in the forge. There is always too much work to do, and the iron is always waiting, demanding its due in sweat and pain. You look at his small hands and know they will soon look like yours. His back will ache before his voice cracks, and he'll learn to sleep through ringing ears. He will outgrow his shirt, but not the burn marks that scar his skin. And when you finally fall apart, knees, shoulders, lungs, he will be the one to carry the hammer you can no longer lift. He is being forged, just as you were, to take his place in the endless, fiery cycle of the family trade. People might say it's unfair, that the cycle of inherited pain should end. But this is how it has always been, a lineage of soot, steel, and survival. You are not just passing down a trade, you are passing down a legacy, the solemn duty to tend a forge that must never cool. And so, you raise your son to do it all again, not because you are cruel, but because someone has to keep the fire going, and in this world, that someone is him. A lifetime of standing too close to the fire, of swinging too much iron, and of breathing too little clean air has taken its inevitable toll. It was never a question of if your body would fail you, only when. And now, that time is upon you. Your knees now creak like the old wooden doors of a storm-battered church. Your back, bowed for decades over the anvil, has finally refused to straighten. Your fingers, once strong enough to bend raw steel, now tremble when you lift a simple cup. The forge still roars, but your arms no longer answer its call. You do not go out in a blaze of glory. There is no heroic finale, no stirring ballad sung in your honor. Your exit from the world of labor is simply a slow, quiet fade into the background. You begin by handing the most demanding tasks over to your son. You find yourself sitting more, your role shifting from master to consultant. He asks you questions, and for the first time, you struggle to remember the answers. The villagers, with a quiet understanding, start going directly to him now. The great, familiar ache of the craft has finally shifted to new shoulders. You were never a wealthy man. You never owned vast tracts of land or wore fine clothes. But your life was rich in a way that few could understand. You were necessary. In a world of fleeting loyalties, your skill was a constant anchor. You kept the knight's sword sharp, the farmer's wheels turning, and the lord's gates swinging securely. The world may not have thanked you often, but you knew a profound truth. It moved because of you. And in that simple, powerful knowledge, you find a quiet dignity that no amount of gold could ever buy. It is unlikely that you will live to see your 50th year. Most blacksmiths don't. The damage from a lifetime of labor simply piles up until the body can bear no more. Your lungs are blackened from decades of smoke, your joints ground down like iron on stone, and your heart worn out from the constant heat and effort. But when you are gone, your work will remain. The nails you hammered will still hold the church doors together. The blades you forged will still rest on noble hips. You leave behind no titles, just your tools, your scars, and a son with a hammer in his hand. You were never a knight, resplendent in polished armor that caught the sun. You never rode into glorious battle with banners flying. But it was you who made that armor, piece by painstaking piece. You never farmed the rolling lands, but it was you who forged the heavy iron plows that carved the earth. You did not build the great stone castle on the hill, but every nail in its massive beams and every hinge on its imposing gates were touched by your fire, shaped by your hands. You were the unseen creator, the silent partner in every great endeavor. While nobles argued over land and kings changed crowns, you stood steadfast by your forge, day in and day out, shaping the world one piece of iron at a time. Your contribution was not in grand gestures, but in 1,000 small, essential things that no one ever thought to celebrate: the rivets, the hooks, the braces, the buckles. These were the humble, forgotten components of civilization, the things that drew no crowds and earned no praise, but were absolutely vital for holding the entire world together. It is a strange irony that no bard ever composed a verse in praise of your trusty tongs or wrote songs about the rhythmic might of your hammer. But your true legacy, your unsung epic, is written into the very fabric of the world around you. It exists in every working wheel that turns without breaking, in every sword that holds its edge in the heat of battle, and in every humble barn door that swings true on its hinges. That was you. Your work was not meant to be admired, it was meant to endure. People would walk past your forge, see the billowing smoke, and smell the sweat and soot, assuming that was the whole story. But inside, beyond their sight, a symphony of heat and steel was constantly playing, a testament to the eternal struggle between raw chaos and human will. It was a place of incredible endurance and creation. You didn't just forge iron into shapes, you forged civilization. You took the raw, stubborn earth and, through fire and effort, transformed it into the very tools of progress. Your name, etched crudely in wood on a simple grave, might fade from memory within a generation, but your work, your true essence, carries on. Your son, his hands now as calloused as yours once were, lifts your heavy hammer. Your grandson, in time, will learn the secrets of the heat and the feel of the iron. The tools you built and the skills you perfected are passed from one hand to the next, a current of fire flowing through the generations. The work endures, even when the man is gone. You were never crowned, never honored, never celebrated by the people whose lives you made possible, but you were the secret that held their world together. Without you, nothing moved. No carts could roll to market, no armies could march to war, and no homes could be secured against the dark. You were the invisible foundation hidden beneath the grand stories of the history books. You were the steady, glowing ember beneath the epic tales of kings. In a world made of wood and stone, you were the fire, the silent spark that turned raw ore into progress. Long before the word alchemy conjured images of robed mystics in European labs whispering over bubbling flasks, it was something far more ancient and sacred. Its true genesis lies not in medieval castles, but in the shimmering heat of ancient Egypt. Their transformation was not a trick of science, but a divine principle, a sacred law of the cosmos etched into every corner of life and death. This was the primordial fire from which all other alchemical traditions would eventually be lit, a flame first kindled on the banks of the Nile. The ancient Egyptians had a word for this sacred art, kimia, derived from chem, meaning black land. This referred to the dark, fertile soil left behind by the annual flooding of the Nile. But this was no mere geographic nickname. It held a deep spiritual meaning. To the Egyptians, black was the color of potent, unrealized potential. It was the color of the womb, of the raw matter of the universe waiting to be transformed into new life. The very land of Egypt, therefore, became a living metaphor for the transformative power of nature. For the people of the Nile, alchemy was not confined to a laboratory. It was a force present everywhere. It was in the sacred ritual of mummification, a process that transfigured the body for its journey into eternity, a literal transformation from a mortal vessel to a timeless form. It was in the temples, where priests, acting as divine chemists, blended rare oils, herbs, and minerals into sacred elixirs. They believed that transformation was the very language of the gods, seeing its evidence in the stars, the soil, and even the humble acts of baking and brewing. According to legends that have drifted down through millennia, these early alchemists were guided by a divine figure, the great god Thoth. Often depicted with the head of an ibis, Thoth was the Egyptian god of wisdom, magic, writing, and the moon. He was the divine keeper of secrets, the one who understood the hidden architecture of the cosmos. Lore states that it was Thoth himself who first revealed the profound secrets of creation, transformation, and the soul's perilous journey beyond death, preserving them on a single, mysterious object of immense power, the legendary Emerald Tablet. If ancient Egypt was alchemy's birthplace, Thoth was its divine midwife. In Egyptian mythology, he was not just a god, he was the god of knowledge, the divine scribe who recorded the laws of the universe. With the head of a sacred ibis and a lunar disk above him, Thoth was a symbol of cosmic equilibrium and divine order. In a world obsessed with transformation, he was revered as the sacred scribe of all hidden truths. The Egyptians believed he didn't just practice alchemy, he embodied it, authoring thousands of books of divine wisdom. The whispers of the Emerald Tablet have echoed through time like a sacred riddle carved into the bones of civilization. This legendary artifact was said to be a slab of green crystal, inscribed with a short, poetic, and cryptic text barely a dozen lines long. Yet within those enigmatic lines, it was believed, lay the ultimate key to transforming matter, spirit, and reality itself. The text begins with a sentence that has haunted mystics for centuries. That which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above. This simple, elegant line from the Emerald Tablet contains the foundational principle of all Western esoteric thought correspondence. It suggests the microcosm, the individual, and the macrocosm, the cosmos, are not separate but are mirrors of each other. What happens in the heavens is reflected in the human soul. The tablet, therefore, wasn't a simple recipe for gold. It was a complete worldview. It proclaimed that the universe is not fixed, and that everything, from base lead to an ignorant mind, can be refined and transmuted into a state of perfection. As the golden age of the pharaohs faded, the sacred art of alchemy did not vanish. Instead, it migrated, its secrets traveling like precious cargo along ancient trade routes. Carried by scribes, mystics, and conquerors, its flame passed from the embers of Egypt into the hands of other great empire Persia. But this was not a simple transfer of knowledge. In the crucible of Persia, alchemy itself underwent a profound transformation, blending its original spiritual fire with the dualistic philosophy of Zoroastrianism, the eternal battle between light and darkness. While Persian spiritual ideas burned brightly, it was a Greek-Egyptian mystic named Zosimos of Panopolis who gave alchemy its first truly distinct voice. Living in Roman-controlled Egypt around the 3rd or 4th century CE, Zosimos was no ordinary philosopher. His writings brilliantly fused technical descriptions of furnaces and distillation with bizarre, visionary journeys into the soul. In his most famous dream, he sees himself dismembered and burned in an alchemical furnace, not as a horror, but as a divine process, the symbolic death of his profane self, the necessary purification of his soul. As the embers of ancient knowledge flickered across the crumbling remnants of the Egyptian, Greek, and Persian worlds, a new empire rose to claim the mantle of civilization. Under the banner of Islam, from the 8th to the 13th century, a vast intellectual renaissance began, a period known as the Islamic Golden Age. While Europe descended into the Dark Ages, great cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba became shining beacons of knowledge. They were sanctuaries for philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, and, most importantly, the sacred science of alchemy. At the heart of this intellectual revival stood Jabir ibn Hayyan, known to the West as Geber. More than a philosopher, he was a true experimental scientist who brought order to the mystical art. He introduced a structured, testable discipline to alchemy, inventing tools and refining processes like distillation and crystallization that are still recognizable today. Often called the father of chemistry, his work laid the foundation for modern science by insisting that transformation, while spiritual, must also be understood through rigorous experimentation. Yet, for all his scientific rigor, Jabir did not abandon the spiritual roots of the craft. He believed that everything in the universe was composed of the 4 classical elements, but he added that they were also infused with spiritual qualities. His intricate system blended this with numerology and astrology, viewing the cosmos as a unified whole. In his philosophy, every transformation in the material world was a direct mirror of a deeper, more significant transformation happening within the alchemist's own soul. Jabir also introduced the elegant idea of mizan, or balance, as the key to all alchemical work. He theorized that metals were formed from 2 principles: sulfur, the fiery, masculine aspect, and mercury as the fluid, feminine aspect. The difference between lead and gold was simply the perfect ratio of these 2 principles. Gold was matter in a state of divine equilibrium. He believed that if this balance could be achieved through careful processes, then even the basest metal could be elevated to a state of perfection. Jabir's monumental influence did not remain confined within the Islamic world. Over the centuries, his extensive texts were painstakingly translated into Latin and began to circulate throughout medieval Europe. This transmission ignited a new, fervent wave of Western alchemists who would build their own theories directly upon his teachings. In a great historical irony, many did so without ever realizing they were standing on the shoulders of a Persian genius. Through Jabir, alchemy took its most decisive step from mystical art toward methodical science. As knowledge was being preserved and expanded in the Islamic world, much of Europe remained cloaked in superstition and intellectual darkness. But powerful knowledge has a way of traveling. Slowly, smuggled piece by piece through the porous borders of language and conquest, alchemy made its way westward. The critical bridge was built in cosmopolitan centers of learning like Toledo and Cordoba in Islamic Spain, where Christian, Jewish, and Muslim scholars worked side by side, translating the brilliant works of Jabir Zosimos, and Aristotle. By the 12th century, Europe was starving for knowledge. The rediscovery of these ancient texts was nothing short of a cultural detonation. But what arrived was not simply practical science, it was the full art of alchemy, a breathtaking fusion of spirit and matter, science and meaning. Suddenly, in the quiet scriptoriums of monasteries, monks began hiding strange manuscripts behind sacred scriptures. They began experimenting with metals, not just to purify them, but to purify their own souls, igniting an obsession with the idea of transmutation. This renewed obsession was centered on the intoxicating notion that base metals like lead could be transformed into pure gold, and by extension, that the flawed human soul could achieve a similar state of perfection. Influential texts like the Turba Philosophorum, an allegorical dialogue among ancient sages, and the Picatrix, an enigmatic grimoire of astrological magic, circulated among the learned. These works didn't just pass on recipes, they carried entire worldviews that planted potent, revolutionary seeds in the minds of the curious. The Latin translations of these profound texts often circulated in secret, disguised as religious treatises to avoid the wrath of the church. After all, alchemy posed a fundamental threat to the established order. If lead could become gold, could a peasant become a noble? Could a mortal man, through his own efforts, become divine? The church watched with deep suspicion, but the allure of alchemy, with its promise of a hidden path to perfection outside established authority, proved too strong to resist. By the late Middle Ages, alchemy in Europe had become a holy quest. At the very heart of that quest lay one singular obsession, the philosopher's stone. This legendary substance was not seen as a simple chemical catalyst. It was a profound mystery wrapped in allegory, hidden within cryptic symbols, and cloaked in poetic riddles. Said to possess the power to transmute metals and grant immortality through the elixir of life, it became the most sought-after and mythologized artifact in the entire Western esoteric tradition. To true initiates, however, the stone was not a physical object, but a spiritual state to be achieved. In the cryptic manuscripts, it went by many names: lapis philosophorum, the red stone, or the powder of projection. Some claimed it was a literal, ruby-red substance. Others insisted it was a metaphor for spiritual awakening, but all agreed it was the key to ultimate transformation. Lead was simply immature gold, they believed, and the philosopher's stone was the divine catalyst that could accelerate its natural evolution toward perfection. Great European alchemists like Albertus Magnus and Roger Bacon devoted their lives to this pursuit. They built furnaces, studied the stars, and wrote cryptic texts filled with symbolic imagery: serpents devouring their own tails, suns and moons getting married, and dragons battling kings. These were not fantasies but complex metaphors for the stages of transformation. The creation of the stone was said to follow a sacred path as the magnum opus, or the great work, a journey every alchemist had to undertake. The great work began with nigredo, the blackening, a stage symbolic of death, decay, and the breaking down of the ego. Then came albedo, the whitening, representing purification and the washing away of impurities. After this was citronitus, the yellowing, a stage of dawning illumination and spiritual awakening. Finally, there was rubedo, the reddening, which symbolized rebirth and the glorious emergence of the philosopher's stone itself. This process was hidden in metaphor because true transformation was not meant for the uninitiated. The very secrecy that seemed to threaten alchemy in Europe also, paradoxically, became what preserved it. As the church began to scrutinize the art more closely, alchemy was forced underground. What was once open dialogue in temples now became a hidden, clandestine practice. To avoid persecution, alchemists cloaked their teachings in layers of allegory and bewildering symbolism. Thus began an era where the true wisdom of alchemy was concealed within secret societies and coded manuscripts. The Rosicrucians, a mysterious brotherhood that surfaced in the 17th century, claimed to be the inheritors of this ancient wisdom passed down from Egypt. Their manifestos spoke of spiritual enlightenment and the hidden sciences. Then there were the Freemasons, whose rituals and rich symbolism echoed deeply with alchemical philosophy, themes of purification, transformation from a rough to a perfect stone, and the search for inner light. Whether or not they practiced literal alchemy, their symbolic language aligned perfectly with its ultimate goal. By the 17th and 18th centuries, a quiet revolution was brewing that would both inherit and bury the legacy of alchemy. The Age of Enlightenment had arrived, and with it came a new way of seeing the world. The mysticism and metaphor that had cloaked alchemical thought were no longer welcomed. In their place came a new language, one of empiricism, logic, and repeatable results. Alchemy's more disciplined and secular successor had finally arrived, and its name was chemistry. The goal of this new science was no longer spiritual perfection, but measurable, material change. No more dragons or black suns, just beakers, balances, and precise documentation. A final nail in the coffin came from Robert Boyle. In his 1661 book, The Sceptical Chymist, he argued that matter was made up of atoms, and that chemical reactions could be explained without mystical forces. He didn't mock alchemy, but he stripped it of its esoteric heart, insisting it must be explained through natural laws. Soon after Boyle, the great French chemist Antoine Lavoisier delivered another decisive blow. His meticulous experiments on the role of oxygen in combustion definitively disproved the ancient Greek theory of the four elements, earth, air, fire, and water, that had served as alchemy's foundation for 2 millennia. The periodic table would follow, and laboratories became the new secular temples of knowledge. Alchemy, with its hidden codes and sacred metaphors, was increasingly seen as an outdated and embarrassing relic of a superstitious age. Yet, here lies the great paradox: chemistry, the very science that cast alchemy into the shadows, owed its existence to its mystical predecessor. The essential tools of the trade, the alembic, the crucible, the bain-marie, were all invented in the alchemist's furnace. The fundamental techniques, from purification to crystallization, were born from the alchemist's quest to refine matter. And most importantly, the foundational spirit of curiosity was inherited directly from that ancient craft. Alchemy had walked so that chemistry could run. Alchemy may have vanished from the halls of science, but it never truly died. Instead, just as its principles taught, it transformed. What began in the tombs of Egypt was refined in the fire temples of Persia and encoded in the hidden texts of medieval Europe did not simply disappear. Its practical, outward form was shed, but its inner message, the belief in transformation, unity, and the interconnectedness of all things, endured, splintering into chemistry, medicine, and even modern spirituality. In the 20th century, a new kind of alchemist emerged, one who worked not with a furnace, but with a notebook and a mind full of dreams. The brilliant Swiss psychologist Carl Jung rediscovered the hidden wisdom of alchemy, arguing that the ancient alchemists were unconsciously mapping the human psyche. The Negredo was depression, the albedo, insight, the rubedo, the birth of a unified self. The philosopher's stone, Jung said, was a powerful symbol for individuation, the process of becoming whole.